Hello and welcome to week 8 in the psychology of adulthood, and we are going to be taking on generativity, which is, coming from Erickson's point of view, is the longest stage. It is where we produce our life. It's our imprint upon the world. This is the largest time when we are creating our legacy that we will then celebrate later in life when we get to the 8th stage in Erickson. But we'll get to Erickson in just a moment. Generativity starts out within this chapter. I talk about expertise. And this is the kind of expertise that we refer to as people who are first experts, they're wise, they're our mentors. This age is the time that we transition from entering into the generative aspects of our life and the diversity of those things and developing an expertise in those things. So by midlife, we are transitioning into a period of time where we may be mentoring other people about the knowledge and wisdom that we've gained. Now, I talk about some of the research done about achieving expertise, and one of the formulas that out there, and it's certainly not, it's not, cut and dry like this, but if you're going to become an expert at something, it sort of takes about 10 years of doing something, or about 10,000 hours of practice and application and whatnot. And I give you the example of Simone Biles, who throughout her childhood, racked up an incredible amount of practice hours and competition hours to become the greatest gymnast in history, as she is right now. And that expertise compressed into her childhood, basically, such that she's arrived into adulthood, she was already an expert in that. Plenty of time to develop another expertise if she wants to get out of gymnastics. I'm sure she will one of these days. And she has plenty of time. Most of us spent our childhood not doing the kinds of disciplined activities that it takes to become a world famous gymnast, but we went to school, we're developing our abilities to learn, then we enter the job market, or we go to school, or go to the military, or whatever, and we start collecting experiences, and soon there's a whole list of things that we can become expert at. Now, so things about experts. We have content know-how, just pure knowledge gained from education and experience. We have expertise in the amount of time working in that domain. So there's a certain amount that might be learned through the active process of, let's say, going to school or trainings or whatever. And then there's just time on the floor, time on the job, the amount of time that you spent fixing engines, or the amount of time that you spent raising children, or that really on the ground type expertise starts to develop this kind of a fluid, automatic type behavior when it comes to solving problems within that domain. You might have titles, degrees, supervisor or administrators, or maybe it's degrees like PhDs or something like that. And then there are other measures of those, depending on what it is that you're actually examining. There might be other measures of experience and knowledge in that particular field. And the idea here is that the driving force of development is this need to develop a sense that I'm contributing to the world through this process that Erickson identified as generativity. Now, as we look at Erickson's theory, the graphic for this appears way earlier in the course book. It's actually on page 126. Here's the graphic of the process of Erickson's psychosocial theory. And we have up here in the top left-hand corner, we have infancy, trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt. industry versus inferiority. And at that point, we move into those first structures of identity and the roles that we play in the world. And then stuck right in there, we have emerging adulthood, and then young adulthood about connecting with other people. And here we go into middle adulthood, generativity versus stagnation. Now we're going to get into the idea, what happens when somebody doesn't make it in this area, the idea of the midlife crisis and those kind of things. We'll be getting into that a little bit later. But how do we achieve generativity? There's many ways, and individuals can achieve generativity in more than one way. So just a little laundry list of that. The creation of your family, the creation of your kids, the creation of your extended family, the whole shtick that your family is, the family get-togethers, that whole kind of thing, that individuals can achieve an incredible amount of generativity and feel very proud in what they've created on the world. In addition, there's friend groups, and maybe the bowling team or the club that you belong to, the Elks or the Masons or whatever, these kinds of external organizations that you belong to, sports teams maybe, and that's a way in which people achieve generativity. We might see, for instance, an individual's pathway through athletics might be they may play athletics when they're in school, maybe even in college, and then they go into adult leagues, and then they may become coaches for those same sports. That kind of arc of that sport playing a very key role in who they are as a person, yet their actual jobs changing within that sport over time. Of course, there's work, these actual jobs that we have, and that becoming more and more expert at those jobs, maybe becoming experts in many different things. Let's say there's a notion that still exists, but it really doesn't have as much meaning today as it used to, is that individuals would, the linear aspect of career development and being about that I'm going to get the training that I need to do a job, do that job for a very long time, and then stop doing that job. And hopefully by the end of my career, I'm passing on my knowledge to the next generation, and I leave, and fade away into retirement. And we're seeing now that technology is changing so fast. And I mean technology in a very broad sense, not just electronic devices, but what we would call sociological technology, which is the knowledge of things changing. You become an expert in your field, there's going to be changes that are going to come along because of research and new devices, but also new knowledge about how things work, that you'll have to continue to develop your skill set. Now, you might become an expert at learning new things. So let's say you're in school to become a nurse, and your career may not be a med-surg floor forever. You might do med-surg, then you're going to adapt the changes that happen on the med-surg floor, and then you might work in pediatrics, then you adapt the changes all that time, then you might work in the ER, the operating room, then you might go into home health, all these different things as you become an expert at many different things as you continue that lifelong learning journey. Then I separate this out in terms of vocation. Now, it may be, and it is the case for me, that my job is pretty much the same as my vocation, but I have another vocation as well. So my job is a very, very central part of my identity. Very important. Being a teacher, being a college teacher, being an academic, all of those things, they're very important in terms of my own identity and who I perceive myself as. And so that the activities that I engage in that feed me and is very, very deep level is the same as my job. To me, I think that's a really good thing, that I get paid for what I do and I love what I do. In addition, we may have other vocation kind of things where we're very interested, we're very important part of who we are. So maybe you race cars, or you also, but you're not doing it for a living, unless some of you are in NASCAR. I don't know, maybe some of you are, but you're not a race car driver, but maybe you race cars up at Unity or something like that. That's a big, or you do mudding, or maybe you have a huge garden and you're really into that, or maybe you're building a beautiful house and you're constantly upgrading that, or you have great hobbies. For me, it's music. It's this whole other part of my life that's very enriching, and a big part of who I am as well. So this kind of distinction between work and becoming expert at that, and then vocation, which could be work, but it could be other work, or it could be something that's not paid at all. It could be your volunteer work. It could be that you lead Bible study, and that kind of thing. That could become very vocational, very important, or a very big part of your generativity. Then we look at all the creative things that we do, and I mentioned some of them already. There's music, of course, building your house, the garden. I mean, everything in which you are instrumental in creating something new. It could be painting. It could be. There's a good friend of mine who, when she retired, she's never shown any interest in painting ever. She got into painting, and now she's in galleries all over the place. In just a few short years, it's just become her vocation. She had done the whole work world, and now she's off into this like second wind, this second career, where she's established herself as quite a painter. She's found another vocation in her life. And then there's the process of our spiritual growth, our transcendence, our understanding, the creation of life wisdom. We have wisdom from our experience, gathering together all of this knowledge that we've had and putting it into a philosophy of life. And these are all, of course, and you're going to see how these kind of build up to that point in Erickson's 8th stage, when we're looking at integrity, when we're looking back on life and we're looking at what we have generated, and we're evaluating that as a life well lived, a very important part of our life that we can anticipate. And finally, in this chapter, I talk about Carl Rogers' personality theory of the self, and that is the self is made up of 3 components. One is the ideal self, what we aspire to be like. The other one is the true self, who we're really like, our true self that we only know. And then there's the public self, or self-image, that we project to the world. And the process that starts to happen in generativity in this age is those start coming closer and closer together. Our real self becomes more like our ideal self, which becomes more like our social self, or our self-image. Now, it might be we lower our standards. Maybe we held ourselves, we were working to impress everybody, and now we're not so worried about that. Maybe I'm become a little bit forgiving of who I am, my real self, and I'm not as much conflict between my ideal self and my real self. And at this point, I'm starting to learn that it's okay for me to be just me. Or maybe I've moved socially into a position where I can now be who I really want to be, because I'm the boss or something like that. I can have ideas and express them the way I want, and without worrying about necessarily getting fired or something like that. So to a degree, we all have bosses, but that's it. So what I want you to do in terms of the discussion is I want you to share current and future expertise that you have. And you can't get out of this. You can't say, I'm not an expert at anything. You are an expert at many things. You have been you for well over 10,000 hours. So you are essentially an expert on you. Everybody's got that. Now, maybe you still confuse yourself because you're complex and all that. That's fine, but you're still an expert. You're an expert at that. Maybe you're an expert cooking. Maybe you've had a whole career. Maybe you're well into generativity and you could list off 4 or 5 things that you're really good at, that you feel very confident at. All of you have this. It doesn't really, don't value it, because what I mean by that, don't say, well, mine's a nothing. I'm really good at quilting. That's it. That is just as legitimate in this conversation as I'm very good at, designing rockets to go to Mars. They're the same as far as generativity is concerned, things that you become expert at. But also consider your future anticipated expertise. You're in school, which the way I've always perceived of as school is compressed experience. We're taking what, you could put you on the job and you can learn some of these things, but we're going to crunch it into in a very, very short period of time and expose you to things that are rare. You get that in education. Now, like if someone's a physician, the physician most of the time doesn't deal with rare diseases. Otherwise, we wouldn't call them rare. But you learn about those in school because in the event that they would happen, they would be prepared for that. That's why school is important, because school will prepare them for the things that don't happen often. It would take way too long. And truthfully, an individual may never encounter some of the rare things in their field, or they only encounter it once, and we certainly want that person to be able to problem solve around that. So I want you to talk about your current and future expertise as it relates to your sense of self. Now, the next thing in the assignment, what I'm going to be having you do is you're going to be designing another slideshow. I think you've done one already, which is you design a slideshow and you put a little voiceover on top of it. I'm going to the page now so I can show you the assignment. So here's our course book. We have the Chapter 8 assignment, Cells. This will focus on Carl Rogers' 3 cells. And the degree, really, and Carl Rogers' theory is really useful because it's descriptive. We can sit here and talk about the 3 selves within each one of us. I can tell what my ideal self is, tell what my real self is, and I can tell what my self-image is. It's also developmental that we see those things over time. They tend to become more and more similar to each other. It's also a form of counseling, because Rogers was a therapist first and foremost. He was a psychotherapist, so he felt that the purpose of psychotherapy was to bring those things closer together, help people to bring those closer together so that they felt that their identity was congruent. That means that those circles were largely overlapped and the individual felt true to themselves, to the ideals, to who they really were, and to the self that they portrayed to the world. Then there are aspects of our identity and personality that are incongruent, say ways in which we act that are not in line with our ideals, or ways in which we really are, but we don't portray them to the world. We keep them private. Maybe for good reasons, but nonetheless, that strain creates some stress, and that stress is caused by incongruence between those 3 cells. So the slideshow is going to focus on creating, here's the grading rubric. You have a title slide, then you describe the theory. Take a slide or two to describe what Rogers' theory is, the different cells and what they mean, to provide some definitions to that. And then you're going to apply that by giving me a slide, one or more slides, that provides personal examples of both congruent and incongruent parts of yourself. You will need to send this to me as a keynote if you're using Apple products, or PowerPoint, which you can use on either, with the voiceover on it. So don't do a PDF. Those don't work. When you convert something to PDF, the audio is gone. So you're doing this is very short, just a couple minutes long. Just going through, you're going to describe, welcome to my presentation, describe the theory, and then describe a few examples of congruence and a few examples of incongruence. The slide is nicely laid out. You have some nice graphics on it. It's attractive. I put these kinds of assignments in because it's important to learn how to do public speaking. It's the closest we can get in terms of an online class without, having a Zoom meeting where we're all together. It's the closest thing you can get for preparing for a speech. What I'm having you do by creating a slideshow and narrating it, it's what you would do at a practice for a presentation. You can actually record it and listen to yourself and cringe. I cringe every time I listen to any one of these videos. I don't like my voice. It's a little squeaky in my ears. It has much more resonance in my head. But nonetheless, this is a good practice for public speaking when and if you need to talk about things such as in an interview or when you're presenting a proposal or anything like that. So those two assignments for this week, the discussion on expertise and the slideshow talking about Rogers' theory and your own personal experiences of congruence and incongruence. And that's it for this week. After this week, we're on break. In fact, KVCC, where I work full-time, is on break this week. You're on break next week. So let's have a nice, strong week, and you'll have a time for a break to catch up on things or to work on the final project or whatever it is that you want to do at that time. So at least there'll be less to-do lists, maybe, for many of you. All right, so take care. Have a great week, and I'll see you online.